Welcome to the Arizona Sunset Podcast, Episode 2. In this episode, I chat with the amazing John Hamblin. Now, full disclaimer, John Hamblin is my maternal grandfather, so I fully admit my bias as to his amazingness. But I think he brings out a few good points and has some good stories to tell. We discuss his life history, caring for a spouse with ALS and her passing, caring for his current spouse who is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and his own age and issues, being a primary caregiver for someone who needs that assistance. I want to apologize for the audio issues that you will hear. I had to amplify John's voice so that it was not too quiet and mine was too loud. My fault, total newbie. I will not make this mistake again. Finally, as a bit of introduction, as I mentioned, John Hamblin is my grandfather. The main conversation takes place with him. His wife, Nola Sarine, is in the room for the bulk of the conversation. I refer to her as Aunt Nola because she is my grandma's sister. Grandma Rena was John's wife of 57 years who passed away from ALS about 10 years ago or so. And Grandma Rose is Nola and Rena's mother. Finally, the last name that we mentioned is Papa John, who is John's father and my great-grandfather. With that, please enjoy this candid conversation with John Hamblin. I'd like to introduce John Hamblin, who is my maternal grandfather. You were born, now correct me if I'm wrong, you were born in 1930.
Yes.
You graduated from Mesa High in 48?
Yes.
You then went to your undergrad somewhere, I'm not quite sure.
Arizona State College.
Arizona State College.
Before it was a university.
Okay, and then you attended Northwestern for dental school?
Yes. Graduated in 1954.
Okay.
DVS.
When did you join the Navy? Was
The next day.
the next day?
I started dental school this fall of 1950. And during that summer, Korean War broke out. And so I was 1A on the draft board until I was deferred. So at the start of our senior year, the Selective Service Board in Chicago came to the school and called all the seniors in. They said, any of you guys have never been in the service before, we're going to get you. So there was about 6 or 8 of us went down and we went to the Navy Office of Procurement in Chicago and applied for a commission. This was probably in November 1953. I didn't hear much about it until sometime in 1954. They knew the day I was going to graduate. And I said, they had told me to report the day after I graduated. I was sworn in the Navy as a lieutenant junior grade. With I had about 4, maybe 6 weeks to get to San Diego, which gave me time to come to Arizona and take my licensing exam to practice dentistry in Arizona.
And at that time you had one daughter?
One and one on the way.
One, okay. So ultimately you were blessed with 5 girls.
Yes.
And then you were in the Navy for how long?
I had 2 years active duty, and probably about 1960, all of a sudden I was promoted from lieutenant, which is Army captain, to lieutenant commander, which is Army major. So I got interested in it, and I was able to go to 2 weeks training, even though I didn't have a billet. And while the first time I was there, I was considering transferring, getting active in the U.S. Naval Reserve, and then maybe transferring U.S.N. and make a career on the Navy. Well, I got there, and the senior dental officer had all the personality of a bleeding hemorrhoid. So that made up my mind. I came back to Mesa and rented an office space and bought the equipment and moved in. It was with Alan Farnsworth. Well, to continue with the Navy, during that time, the guy that had a billet in the Reserve Training Center in Phoenix died. And so I got that billet. And then I could go there once a week and do dental exams and get a day's pay. And at that time, there was no dental insurance, and I needed the money. So I did that for about 6 years, and I got promoted from lieutenant commander to commander. And about 1968, when I was promoted to commander, that billet, meaning that position, was good for a lieutenant, which is Army captain. They would pay a major, but they wouldn't pay a commander. So I think I had 8 years active duty, and I could have stayed for 12 years and not get paid to get a retirement. So I took a retirement. That ended my Navy career in 1968.
So you were active duty, but you were working 1 day a week while keeping your practice here?
Well, it was a reserve, like
okay.
National Guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. You eventually owned a practice for quite a long while.
Well, it was about that time that I was squabbling with my brother Lyle. There wasn't dental insurance. There just was not enough business to keep all this going. So I met Alan Farnsworth, and then he rented me a space on South Stapley, and I bought the equipment and worked there for several years. Things started picking up.
And then when did you move to Brown?
1970, I've lost the date. My dad said, I want you to have this building. So he sold me the building, and I paid him off. And then Lyle went on to an office, Dale went on to an office. I owned the office there at the corner of Serine and First Street, which is now part of the public library, until the city wanted that. Well, the city bought me out, and that's when we built the office on Brown Road. And I was working around the office on Brown Road until I retired in 2001.
You mentioned 2001. Before we backtracking just a bit, can we talk about your significant medical event in 98, was it? Early 98? When you had a heart attack?
97.
Is that late 97?
I hear about the history of the heart attack. 97, we've been here this whole 1 year.
Okay. Yeah, so how did it happen? What happened that day?
The church just pushed us to have gardens, so I had a garden spot between those two streets. They're about a mile away. It was, I can't think of it, there was kind of a causeway canal between, anyway, I was in that garden by myself. And I needed a tool, so I went down to Linhart's and bought the tool. On the way home, I started feeling funny, and George Allen, who's John Allen's father, saw me driving home, and then he said I could look at you and tell something's wrong. So I walked in, Rita took one look at me and called 911, and I went in the bathroom and threw up. And then I went and lay down on the bed, and the paramedics, as I learned later, they were driving down this street on Stapley, coming back from another call. So they came right in. As soon as they got in, they started taking off my shirt and putting leads on. I coded.
Oh, wow.
That's a deep ventricular fibrillation, you know. Well, they shocked me back. I knew there was a void, and I couldn't get them to talk to me. The room was full of people. And there was one of the firemen there that said to the other one, said, when I coded, he's dead.
You heard that?
Reno was standing right there.
Yeah.
With Dale's wife, Bonnie. And anyway, I didn't hear it. I was out.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I got in the ambulance going to the hospital, and I said, what happened? He said, you know what ventricular fibrillation is? And I said, yes. That's what you had. Oh. So I coded. Did they shock me? Yes. Did I jump like they do in the movies? Yes. And then at that time they got to Mesa, the osteopathic hospital on Mesa Drive. I said, they're going to take me in. No, you're not going to take me there. You're going to take me to Mesa Lutheran. So I went to Mesa Lutheran, and there was a guy named, he had done the first bypass surgery in Mesa Lutheran. And he did the bypass surgery. I got there, and when I coded, I vomited, and so I was vomiting debris in my lungs. They had to wait for that to clear. Most bypass surgeries, they come and get out of the hospital in about 6 or 8 days, but I was totally out of it. Your dad and David Pugh came to give me a blessing. I didn't even know they were there. I have no memory of them being there. There was kind of a fog on it. I was in the hospital 3 weeks today, and I came home. I was really weak. They told me to walk for exercise, and I could get around the dining room table 6 times, and I was done. But I eventually got up to 2.5 miles. It took several months, 2.5 miles, 5 times around this complex here.
And in 98, how old were you?
58.
50. Oh, that's pretty young.
98. Actually, I was 68.
68, 70 minus 2. Of the 3 weeks that you were there, do you remember some of that?
Therapists would come in, and they had to do this breathing exercise because, they slit your sternum, spread apart to get to the heart.
Yeah.
Well, that was very hard to breathe, and you're supposed to breathe deep breaths. So they put a pouch. They said it didn't hurt as bad if you put this pillow over it and hold it like this, and then do the breathing. Oh, I hated that. But and then they had some walking. They'd always have somebody walk right with this IV tubes, and they drag those along.
Right.
Make sure you're covered up behind.
Right.
And walk along, and they'd walk you down the hospital corridors for a while.
How long after that event did it take to get back most of your ability to, care for yourself, to go back to daily life?
Well, I went back to work. That happened in October, and I went back to work very briefly in December, and then half days in January. But it was really about May or June before I really got my strength back.
So about 9 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was 98, and I worked till I retired in 2001.
Now, during that time period, had Grandma's health issues started with her shoulder?
Yeah, she had a torn rotator cuff, and then they did 3 surgeries. The first surgery would have been successful, except somebody in the therapy raised her arm too much. And he heard it, and she heard it, popped the sutures loose.
And when was that?
She died, 2008. It was probably in the fall of 2007.
Okay, so that was quite a while after your heart attack. Okay. Now, prior to the rotator cuff issues, was there any other health symptoms or anything else that would have indicated?
She had some of those TIA, temporary ischemic attacks, where she'd feel faint, and that lead up to a stroke. She had all kinds of tests, but nobody ever tested her for ALS.
Okay.
About January, they tried all these things. In fact, she spent 3 days in the Banner Hospital. Anyway, she was there 3 days. They did every test you could imagine, but never thought about ALS. And so in January, she kept being bad. They sent her to a specialist named Siva Kumar. He got right on right. In fact, she was gone to a neurologist with tests, but she didn't have the right test. So she went. It was January of 2008, and he diagnosed it was ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease. And from there was a steady downhill until she died in October of 2008. Now, I'm sure that was going on many years before the diagnosis was made.
From that point in January, looking back, could you see the start of, this disease in her? I mean, looking with hindsight, of course.
No, not even hindsight. I couldn't recall. I recognized any symptoms of it.
But from that point, it went pretty quick.
She just got the diagnosis late January and died in mid-October.
Yeah.
Which tells me that the disease was pretty well advanced before it was diagnosed.
That's right. That was my thought too. Let me see. In 2008, and she was born in 31.
31.
Okay, so she would have been 71 plus 7, 77, about there.
She was 77. She had a birthday party here in the patio, and all of her friends came.
At the time of the diagnosis in January, did she need much help?
No, but there was pretty fast downhill after that.
Because she had her arm in a sling because of the shoulder and the rotator cuff issues, but she still had function of her other arm, and she was able to get along and take care of herself.
We handled it pretty good between the two of us about the last 3 or 4 weeks. And then she got on hospice. But she had that PAP thing to breathe with at night time, that was an extractor thing that sat there. And she could always communicate with me and tell me what she needed. Hospice people came in, they put her in a hospital bed with that mattress that inflates and deflates like that. But we didn't realize at one time that mattress failed. And so she got bed sores to take care of her. And then, but they would come in 3 times a week and give her a shower, so she was always clean. And bless her heart, she was always reasonably cheerful about things and appreciative of what we were doing for her. She could verbally communicate, and we'd let her sleep, and then she could get to the towards the end, she had one of those Hoyer lifts that slip on, and you could pick her up and put her in a chair, wheelchair, and move her in about, and she could feed herself pretty well.
You're talking about Rena?
Yes.
My sister.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you had help 3 times a week to come help.
Oh, you were clean.
Doing showers, but other than that, I mean, I imagine you were helping her.
Yeah, I was helping her a lot. I was cooking what meals she liked. And,
getting her up, getting her dressed, and caring for her.
Yeah.
You had the in-home help, and then it was all but until the last 3 weeks when she went to a hospice place? Or was that here?
The hospice came here.
Okay, so she was here the whole time?
Yes.
Okay, and how often would hospice come? The last
about 3 times a week.
Okay. What service did they provide that the in-home health people didn't?
I didn't have him until they were there. I did all by myself until those hospice people came.
Okay, so there was no one helping with showering until the very end?
No.
Oh, okay, wow.
Now, bless her heart, Debbie Munden, who was taking care of her hair, and as long as she could be in her wheelchair, and I could wheel her down to the beauty shop, it worked out. But when she could no longer do that, Debbie would come here, and she would take her in this bathroom right here, shower her, and set it up, just keep her looking nice. And we went to the mortuary after Rena died, made her hair without taking. She just take a regular fee, no extra fees for making a house call, and she wouldn't take any money for fixing her hair in the mortuary.
Wow.
She's family.
That's awesome.
Lola still sees her. It's been 10 years since Rena died.
I don't know if it's possible, but I imagine caring for a spouse and coupled with the fact that the spouse is soon going to pass and then dealing with the loss, it's probably hard to separate the toll that it took providing that care from the anticipation.